Trump plans to surrender after Putin's call. Iran twist changes everything. Picture two men. Same morning. Same war. One is standing in lower Manhattan. He is watching his portfolio tick upward. Green, green, green. His phone buzzes. S&P up 1.4%. He exhales. Orders a coffee. The other man is somewhere in the Gulf. He is watching a drone feed. Smoke rising from coordinates he memorized 3 days ago. His radio crackles. No orders. Just static. Same war. Completely different reality. Here is the question nobody in Washington wants to answer. What if those two men are being managed by the same government, but for completely different objectives? Because right now, the United States is fighting 3 wars simultaneously. One on the battlefield, one on the trading floor, and one inside its own cabinet. And here is the brutal truth at the center of all of it. Somewhere in this story, someone handed a master key to a rival. The key to the global energy market. The key to the pressure valve that controls oil prices, inflation, and the American family's monthly budget. That key is now in Vladimir Putin's hands. And the man who handed it to him has been tweeting about peace. Stay with me. This is the triple play. And by the end of this video, you will never watch a White House press briefing the same way again. Let's start with the CBS phone call, because most coverage got it completely wrong. When Donald Trump called into CBS News during a period of active U.S.-Iran tension to signal a possible diplomatic opening, the mainstream read was simple. President makes a mistake. Telegraphs weakness. Wrong. That is the surface reading. Here is the deeper reading. That phone call was a financial ceasefire. Think about it. The moment Trump's voice hit the airwaves signaling we are talking, futures markets moved. Oil pulled back. The S&P bounced. Defense stocks wobbled. That is not a coincidence. That is a pressure release valve, deliberately opened for a specific audience. And that audience was not Tehran. It was not Moscow. It was the bond market. Right now, the single most important general in this entire conflict is not the CENTCOM commander. It is not the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The most important general is the S&P 500. Because Trump's political survival, his narrative of economic strength, his entire legacy lives or dies on whether that number is green or red on any given Friday afternoon. Consider the math. Every 10% drop in the S&P 500 wipes approximately $3.5 trillion in household wealth. That hits retirement accounts. That hits consumer confidence. That hits the exact demographic that forms Trump's core political base. Suburban homeowners, small business owners, 401k holders, people who check their phone every morning before they check the news. So when tensions spike in the Gulf, when a tanker gets hit, when Iranian proxies launch drones at U.S. assets, the president faces an immediate fork in the road. Escalate militarily and risk a market panic. Or signal de-escalation and buy time for the green to come back. The CBS call was the latter. It was market management dressed as diplomacy. But here is where it gets dangerous. When your commander-in-chief is making military communication decisions based on futures market reactions, you have created a situation where your enemy can manipulate your policy simply by threatening your stock market. Tehran knows this. Moscow absolutely knows this. Your adversaries have reverse-engineered the president's decision matrix. Spike tension. Watch for the signal. Watch the market reaction. Adjust accordingly. The S&P 500 is not just a number. In this conflict, it is an intelligence asset. And right now it is leaking. Before I show you the Putin receipt, which is the most damning piece of this entire puzzle, I need to know where you stand right now. Do you trust the president or do you trust the Pentagon? Type Trump or Pentagon in the comments. I am watching the tally live. We will come back to those numbers before this video ends. Now, the Putin receipt. To understand what Russia is doing, you have to understand something I call the energy loop. It is the single most elegant piece of geopolitical engineering of the last decade, and almost nobody is talking about it in plain language. Here's how it works. Russia's federal budget requires oil prices above approximately $90 to $95 per barrel to remain solvent. Putin's war in Ukraine, his domestic spending promises, his military modernization, all of it runs on petrodollars. High oil prices are not a luxury for Moscow. They are existential. Donald Trump, meanwhile, has staked enormous political capital on low energy prices. Drill baby drill. Gas prices down. Inflation under control. It is the central promise of his economic platform. These two objectives are in direct, structural contradiction. And sitting right between them, like a volume knob on the global economy, is Iran. Here is the mechanism. Iran exports somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million barrels of oil per day. When those barrels flow freely, they add supply to the market and push prices down. When Iranian supply is disrupted by sanctions, by conflict, by the mere threat of conflict, those barrels disappear, supply tightens, and prices spike. Putin does not need to touch the oil market directly. He does not need to cut OPEC production. He just needs Iran to stay volatile. Every drone fired by an Iranian-backed proxy, every seized tanker, every threat of Strait of Hormuz closure, every escalatory statement out of Tehran, each one of those events tightens the global oil supply picture. Each one pushes Brent crude higher. Each one adds dollars to Russian revenue projections. And Putin, through military cooperation agreements, through weapons transfers, through the strategic relationship built since 2015 in Syria, has enormous influence over Iran's willingness to escalate or pull back. This is the energy loop. Russia turns up Iran's temperature. Oil prices rise. Russian revenues increase. Trump's economic numbers suffer. Trump needs a deal. Trump signals flexibility. The cycle repeats. The master key I mentioned at the top of this video. This is it. The ability to set the global oil price by proxy without a single Russian soldier touching a single American asset is one of the most powerful strategic tools in modern geopolitics. And the United States has no clean countermove. Why? Because the countermove, maximum pressure on Iran, military escalation, full sanctions enforcement, pushes oil to $115, $120, $130 per barrel, which crashes markets, which hurts Trump politically, which means the president is effectively deterred from the strongest countermeasure by his own economic self-interest. Putin is winning the map, and he is winning it without a war. Now let's talk about the fracture inside the building. The Hegseth interview, what some are already calling a defining moment, was remarkable not for what was said but for when it was said and why it needed to be said at all. Here is a defense secretary going on record with messaging that directly contradicted the president's public posture on Iran. While the White House was signaling openness to a deal, while diplomatic backchannels were reportedly active, the Pentagon's posture was bluntly hawkish. Preparation, readiness, capability. That is not a communications gaffe. That is a civil war of information playing out in real time inside the United States cabinet. Think about what it means when the Secretary of Defense and the Commander-in-Chief are running parallel foreign policies simultaneously. One policy designed for the market, one policy designed for the battlefield, and the adversary, Tehran, Moscow, Beijing, gets to watch both, in public, and calibrate accordingly. This is catastrophic for deterrence. Deterrence requires your enemy to believe you have one coherent will, that your threats are credible, that your signals are reliable. When the Pentagon says one thing and the White House says another, the entire architecture of deterrence begins to crack. And then there is the rebrand. The philosophical shift inside the Pentagon toward a more overtly aggressive power projection posture, what some analysts have begun calling a Department of War mentality, is not accidental. It is a signal from within the military establishment that regardless of what happens on the diplomatic track, the military track is preparing for permanence. This is the forever war signal. Not announced, not debated in Congress, just quietly embedded in force structure, in budget requests, in basing agreements, in the accelerating replacement cycle for assets destroyed in theater. Speaking of assets destroyed, the MQ-9 Reaper losses over the past 18 months represent one of the most underreported stories in American military affairs. A single MQ-9 platform costs approximately $30 to $35 million. The crews are expensive to train. The intelligence data they generate is irreplaceable in theater. Losses to Iranian-backed air defense systems, including systems with distinct Russian technological fingerprints, have accelerated. Each lost Reaper is a data point, and the data points tell a story. The technological edge that made U.S. air power feel unchallengeable is being systematically tested and in some cases eroded. The Pentagon's response has not been to pull back. The response has been to request more. More platforms, more coverage, more basing, more investment. That is not the behavior of an institution preparing for peace. That is the behavior of an institution building a forever war architecture. And the money follows. Every lost reaper is a replacement contract. Every replacement contract is a lobbying win. Every lobbying win is a budget line. The forever war does not require a declaration. It just requires continuation. If you feel like you are being lied to by two different parts of the same government, you are not paranoid. You are paying attention. Hit subscribe. We track the truth here. Not the talking points. Not the narrative. The actual mechanism of power. Now let's bring this home. Literally. Peace on Twitter does not mean peace at the gas pump. And this gap between presidential messaging and market reality is costing American families real money right now. When oil trades above $115 per barrel, the downstream effects are not abstract. They are immediate. Every $10 increase in the per barrel oil price adds approximately 23 to 25 cents per gallon at the pump. At $115 oil, you're looking at retail gasoline prices that cost the average two-car American family somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 extra per year. And it does not stop at the pump. Fertilizer is petrochemical. Transportation runs on diesel. Cold chain logistics runs on diesel. Every link in the American food supply chain runs on oil. When oil is expensive, food is expensive. Grocery bills do not wait for diplomatic breakthroughs. Airlines pass fuel costs to ticket prices. Trucking passes fuel costs to retail goods. The entire consumer economy is downstream of the oil price. This is the hidden tax. It does not show up on your pay stub. Congress did not vote for it. But it is extracted from your household every single month that the conflict in the Gulf remains unresolved. And here is the cruel irony. The president who promised lower energy costs is presiding over a strategic situation that makes lower energy costs structurally impossible. Because solving the Iran problem militarily spikes oil prices in the short term, while the diplomatic track is being sabotaged by the very volatility that Putin is incentivized to maintain. The American family is paying the spread between Trump's promises and Putin's strategy. That spread, right now, is hundreds of dollars a month. Most people are watching the mainstream version of the story. You are seeing the internal version, the mechanism behind the headlines. If this level of detail is what you have been looking for, hit the bell icon. Join the community. We do not report the news here. We decode it. So where does this go? Let me give you the three scenarios. Prediction A. The Potemkin piece. A Potemkin village is a fake facade, something built to look real from a distance but hollow behind the surface. The most likely short-term outcome is a negotiated optics victory. A framework agreement with Iran, celebrated loudly, that in practice changes very little about the underlying force posture, the proxy networks, the weapons programs, or the Russian-Iranian relationship. It gets announced. Markets rally. Oil pulls back to $95. Trump claims a win. And the forever war quietly continues at a lower temperature. This is the most politically convenient outcome, which makes it the most probable. The tell. Watch the Gulf force posture. If carrier strike groups stay in theater 6 months after a deal is announced, the deal is decorative. Prediction B. The Suez moment. In 1956, Britain and France attempted a military intervention in Egypt and were forced to stand down by the United States. It was the moment the world understood that British imperial power was finished, that America had replaced Britain as the dominant global force. The Suez moment in our current timeline looks like this. A military incident in the Gulf, a strike gone wrong, a hostage situation, an escalation that demands a decisive response, and the United States hesitates. That hesitation, driven by market fear and cabinet dysfunction, is visible to the entire world. Into that hesitation, Russia and China step forward with a mediation framework. The region reorganizes around their proposal. The result? The United States is not defeated militarily. It is simply bypassed diplomatically. Gulf states begin quietly hedging toward Moscow and Beijing. The dollar's role in oil pricing faces new structural challenges. The post-1945 American-led order accelerates its unraveling. The tell. Watch Saudi Arabia's bilateral meetings. The kingdom's diplomatic calendar will signal which direction the wind is blowing before any official announcement ever comes. Prediction C. The accidental total war. This is the nightmare scenario, and it is more plausible than anyone in official Washington will publicly admit. The triple play creates a specific kind of danger, a leadership vacuum at the moment of maximum pressure. The president is optimizing for markets. The Pentagon is running a parallel track. The State Department is understaffed and overruled. Intelligence assessments are being politicized. In that environment, a single incident, a U.S. asset destroyed with significant casualties, a miscalculated Iranian strike, an Israeli preemptive action that crosses a threshold nobody clearly communicated, can trigger an escalatory sequence with no clear decision-maker at the top. Wars started by accident are not a historical anomaly. They are arguably the norm. The First World War began with a miscalculation. Every major escalation in history has a moment where someone thought the other side would not actually respond. When your Secretary of Defense and your President are running different foreign policies, the probability of that moment arriving and nobody being empowered to stop it rises dramatically. The tell. Watch the Israeli exit ramp. Israel has been signaling through back channels and public statements that it is deeply uncomfortable with the current ambiguity. Israeli security doctrine cannot tolerate strategic uncertainty about American commitment. If Israel begins taking unilateral action, striking Iranian nuclear infrastructure, moving against proxy networks without U.S. coordination, that is the signal that the exit ramp is closed. An accidental escalation becomes the operating scenario. We started this video with two men, a traitor and a soldier. The traitor has gone home. His portfolio is up. He will sleep fine tonight. The soldier is still there. And here is the question I want to leave you with. The question that every analyst, every intelligence officer, every general worth their rank is asking right now in private. Who actually holds the remote control for this conflict? Is it the president, optimizing for Friday's closing bell? Is it the Pentagon, quietly building a forever war architecture that no election can dismantle? Is it Vladimir Putin, turning a volume knob in Moscow that sets the price of everything from gasoline to geopolitical leverage? Or has the remote control simply been dropped, left somewhere on the floor between the Oval Office and the Pentagon, while everyone argues about whose hand it should be in? Because the most dangerous thing in geopolitics is not an aggressive enemy. It is a leaderless escalation, a crisis moving on its own momentum with no single hand on the wheel. That is the world we are navigating right now. And you deserve to know it. Tell me in the comments. One word. Is what you just watched an American strategy, or is it chaos? I will read every single response. And if this is the kind of analysis you need to actually understand what is happening in the world, not the version they tell you but the version that is actually operating, then our newsletter is linked in the bio. The conflict survival breakdown goes deeper than anything I can post here. Portfolio implications. Regional flashpoints. The scenarios your financial advisor is not modeling yet. Link is in the bio. See you in the next one.